When I found out the villain was a mermaid who shed pearls when crying, I dug the discarded pregnancy test out of the trash. I headed to the rooftop. How many babies do you mermaids have in one litter? Do you eat fish food or baby formula? Barrett, who was in the middle of a suicide attempt, slipped and nearly fell from the 18th floor. I shook my head and sighed. Forget it, after giving birth. I'll just toss it straight into the sea, later, when the child was born. Barrett didn't even dare to sleep, terrified that I might release it into the wild. When the female lead had a falling out with the male lead and came knocking on his door, he was loudly roaring at their eldest son's swimming performance. You're a mermaid, how can you be afraid of water? I know Barrett is the main villain of this world, and I'm the wife his grandfather found for him before he died. My mission after being reborn here was supposed to be saving him, but I've been slacking off. Not only did they not save him, but they also squandered his money even more recklessly and took over his bed. The system, seeing the unchanging corruption value, was utterly despairing. The last time it appeared, it coldly left just one sentence: when the villain dies, I'll come to get you. This wait lasted for over half a year. Today is an auspicious day, favorable for burials, when Barrett, heartbroken by the heroin crystal, climbed alone to the rooftop. I had already adorned myself with all the jewelry from the safe, eagerly awaiting the system's arrival, yet, when the system appeared, its first words were, "Host, why are you wearing the villain's tears?" What? I looked down in shock at the priceless pearl necklace around my neck. Barrett is a mermaid, and these pearls are his tears, the system murmured eerily. A mermaid that sheds pearls. My worldview shattered instantly. This isn't a villain at all, it's clearly a walking gold mine. This string of pearls was originally hidden in a secret compartment in the study. I thought it was a birthday gift for Crystal, but even after her birthday party ended, the gift still hadn't been given, so on a dark and stormy night, I took the opportunity to pocket it. I remember when Barrett noticed me wearing it, he gave me a complicated look and asked, "Do you like this?" I rolled my eyes on the spot. Duh. Who would turn down money? I had it appraised. It's worth 120 million, looking back now. His expression clearly said, "So you like my tears, system? I think he can still be saved." I yanked off my pearl necklace, dug the pregnancy test out of the trash, and dashed toward the rooftop. By then, Barrett had already climbed over the railing, half his body dangling from the 18th floor. Wait, I gasped, holding up the pregnancy test. How many babies do mermaids usually have at once? Do they eat fish food or baby formula? His foot slipped, nearly sending him plummeting from the 18th floor. Clutching the railing tightly, half of his body dangled over the edge. What did you say? Don't want to take responsibility. I felt somewhat disappointed. Why did telling him make death come faster? Fine then, when it's born, I'll just throw it back into the sea. It was just an accident after he took the medicine. Maybe he doesn't even remember it. Before the words could fade, a dark figure had already vaulted back over the railing, pinning me firmly against the wall. How dare you? His eyes churned with towering waves of fury, and I quietly curled the corners of my lips, breathing a sigh of relief. Good, the gold mine is safe. After Barrett returned from the rooftop, he seemed completely off. He settled me in the bedroom, then immediately locked himself in the study. I pressed myself against the door and heard hurried voices inside. Calcium supplements during pregnancy, seaweed, wait, doctor. Are you saying humans carrying merfolk need to soak in seawater every day? His voice suddenly rose sharply. But she's pregnant now. I was holding back laughter so hard my stomach hurt. Who would have thought that the ruthless and sinister villain is now clutching the phone, consulting about obstetrics, his voice trembling. When the study door suddenly opened, I nearly stumbled into his arms. Barrett swiftly steadied me by the waist, the warmth of his palm searing through the fabric. He looked down at me, his gaze settling on my flat stomach, his Adam's apple bobbing. I'm hungry, I interrupted him righteously. I want seafood porridge made by your own hands, soon. The clatter of pots and pans came from the kitchen. The butler hesitated at the door, holding back his words. Last time the master cooked, he nearly burned down the kitchen. I said, "Oh, it's fine, he's got money. If it burns down, we'll just move somewhere else." The butler, an hour later. Barrett emerged with the finished product, his face covered in soot. "Looks okay, probably not poisonous." Just as I was about to bring a spoonful of porridge to my mouth, he suddenly pressed down on my hand. Wait, Barrett carefully picked out all the shell fragments, tested the temperature again, and only then handed the spoon back to me. I deliberately frowned, too bland. His hand reaching for the salt shaker paused midair. Then he turned to open his tablet and earnestly searched for the daily sodium intake for pregnant women, and just like that, I began living a pregnancy life fit for an empress dowager, freshly squeezed orange juice prepared by the villain himself in the morning, him treating me like fragile porcelain during baths, and even when I kicked him awake from leg cramps at midnight, he'd still give me a gentle massage. One early morning, I woke up groggily to find him measuring my waist with a soft tape, his expression as serious as if he were defusing a bomb. What can you possibly see in just 1 month? I teased him on purpose. Barrett's ears turned red at the tips, but he insisted on recording the data in his phone's memo, titled, Mermaid Cub Observation Diary. The most outrageous part was last week when a business partner came to the office to see him. The security guard called for instructions, only to find Barrett down on one knee tying my shoelaces. He spoke coldly into the microphone. Don't bother me with such matters in the future. Madam is taking her afternoon nap. As he finished, he casually tucked the blanket around me. At this moment, I lay on the rocking chair on the terrace, watching Barrett assemble a swing set in the garden. The sunlight dyed the tips of his hair amber, creating a scene that was momentarily heartwarming. Suddenly, the system popped up with a notification. Warning, villain's corruption value has dropped to 90%. Host, its voice carried confusion. Are you sure this can save him? I smiled and touched the pearl necklace around my neck. At least he doesn't want to die anymore, right? After Barrett finished building the swing, I wiggled my toes. Honey, my leg cramped. He wiped his hands clean, knelt on one knee, and massaged it for me. The system said, divine move. Honey, I want a pink pearl. A while ago, I saw a beautiful pink pearl at an auction. Unfortunately, it was bought by the male lead Daniel to make Crystal happy. Make yourself cry. I casually picked up the plate of grapes and placed it beneath his chin. Barrett froze mid-motion, lifting his head with eyes like deep ocean waves filled with disbelief. The color of pearls depends on the mermaid's emotions. I don't care. I rubbed my belly and said leisurely, if you don't cry, I'll set all your offspring free. His expression changed instantly. 3 minutes later, I stared dumbfounded as the notorious villain, who struck fear into the hearts of many outside, now had reddened eyes, dropping pearls with a pit-a-pat sound. Pale pink pearls rolled onto the plate, creating an exceptionally pleasant sound. The system suddenly dinged. Villain's corruption level dropped to 85%. I gleefully picked up the pearls. This task is way too easy. If this keeps up, I'm afraid Barrett will turn into nothing more than a naive, pearl-dropping mermaid under my care. However, just when I thought victory was within my grasp, Crystal arrived, dressed in a plain white dress, her eyes red and swollen. She stood at the villa's entrance like a white rose wilted by the rain. Barrett, please, save my dad. Her voice choked with sobs. He's been taken. You're the only one who can find him. I blocked the doorway and sneered. Go find Daniel. Crystal bit her lip, tears falling even harder. He doesn't have those kinds of connections. I froze for a moment before realizing, of course, the male lead is always the sunny, righteous CEO, while the villain, dark, damp, and unscrupulous. So, when the world needed dirty work done, the first person the female lead thought of was always Barrett, the one with blood-stained hands. I glanced back at Barrett standing at the corner of the stairs. He stood there quietly, his gaze inscrutable, still holding the slipper I had just kicked off. A sudden surge of anger flared up in me. You're not going. Crystal bit her lip, her tears on the verge of falling. Since Jessica won't allow it, then forget it. As she turned, her skirt swayed with a pitiful grace. Just as she was about to step out the door, Barrett suddenly spoke up. Wait. I watched helplessly as he knelt down, gently slipping the slippers onto my feet and even adjusting their position. Then, that bastard actually got up and followed Crystal. Barrett, I grabbed a slipper and hurled it at the back of his head. Don't come back if you leave. The slipper hit its target with pinpoint accuracy, making a crisp, smack sound. He paused his steps but didn't turn around, just rubbing the spot where he'd been hit before continuing forward. I was so angry I almost threw my other slipper at him. At 3 a.m., I checked my phone for the 28th time. The screen remained dark. Suddenly, The system beeped with an alert. Warning, villain's corruption level increased by 12%, current value 97%. What? I bolted upright, nearly throwing out my back. I'd been carrying his kid like a brooding hen, working my ass off just to reduce the darkening value by 15%, and he goes out with the female lead for one night and it shoots back up by 12 points. The system quietly added, to be precise, 4 hours and 38 minutes. What, did Crystal use him as ransom to pay off the kidnappers? I sneered, rubbing my belly. Suddenly, the sound of a car engine came from outside the window. I dashed to the window and saw Barrett's Maybach slowly pulling into the courtyard, its headlights cutting two hazy streaks of light through the rain. What pissed me off even more was that he was carrying something when he got out of the car, the packaging box glaringly stamped with the logo of Sea Moon, that ridiculously expensive seafood restaurant. Crystal's favorite. Perfect. I gritted my teeth and gave the system an order. Exchange the false miscarriage prop for me right now. The system panicked, its code in disarray. Host, calm down. Mermaid offspring are incredibly resilient, but this item costs 5,000 points. Do I look like someone who cares about points? The reason I've been slacking off in this world is that the points I earned from completing tasks in other worlds have already allowed me to retire. When Barrett gently pushed open the bedroom door, he saw me curled up on the bed, my face pale as I clutched my stomach. Jessica, the food box in his hand fell to the ground with a thud, scattering salmon sashimi everywhere. I weakly lifted my eyes and saw a distinct slap mark on his left cheek. Barrett's hands trembled as he picked me up, and the car sped all the way to the hospital. Lying on the hospital bed, I deliberately turned my back to Barrett, listening to his rapid breathing as he spoke with the doctor. There are slight signs of threatened miscarriage, and absolute bed rest is required. The doctor's voice was stern, especially, emotional stability must be maintained. Barrett's voice was hoarse beyond recognition. She, and the baby, for now, everything is temporarily stable, but if there's any more stress, it's hard to say. Young master, the lady's human body was never suited for carrying a mermaid's offspring. The first 3 months are particularly dangerous, if this continues. I'm afraid the child. The sound of the hospital room door closing, then came a dull thud, like a knee hitting the floor heavily. I'm sorry, his trembling voice pressed against the back of my neck. I shouldn't have. I quietly pricked up my ears, waiting for him to continue. I shouldn't have left you alone at home. His fingers gingerly brushed against my shoulder. I spun around abruptly, nearly bumping into his nose. I'm really angry right now. Get out. The system just informed me in my mind that Crystal's father had gambled away $2 million. She didn't want to borrow money from the male lead to bail him out, but instead thought of a way to get Barrett to rescue him without spending a single penny. Upon arriving at the scene, she discovered that the person who kidnapped her father was Barrett's former subordinate, who had been expelled from the Eternal Night Society for making a mistake. But Crystal didn't believe it and thought Barrett had intentionally sent someone to do it. That's why she slapped him. Barrett's expression looked as if he had been struck over the head with a club. He opened his mouth helplessly, but no words came out. Instead, he suddenly hugged me tightly, with such force that I could barely breathe. Let go, you're squishing my stomach. I pounded his back. He immediately recoiled as if shocked, staring at my abdomen in panic, his eyes filled with lingering fear. Jessica, don't be angry. I bought you salmon. Wasn't it bought for Crystal? You mentioned wanting salmon sashimi late at night the day before yesterday, he explained softly. I noted it in my memo. So, Barrett suddenly knelt on one knee beside the hospital bed, carefully holding my hand. Can you forgive me? Looking at his reddened eyes, I suddenly had an idea. Cry a purple pearl, and I'll forgive you. 3 minutes later, I sat happily on the bed, counting the purple pearls in front of me, listening to the system prompt. Villain's corruption value has dropped to 70%. After staying in the hospital for 3 days, I finally uncovered a shocking secret. The doctor who performed my ultrasound turned out to be a clownfish from the ocean depths. I secretly observed him for a long time, and when he bent over to record data, I whispered, "Can you cry pearls?" The doctor's hand trembled, nearly dropping the pen, and he awkwardly adjusted his glasses. "Madam, not all mermaids can produce pearls." I sighed in disappointment, turning to look at Barrett, who was sitting beside me peeling an apple, and murmured, "So you're a rare breed." Barrett paused the fruit knife in his hand and handed me a piece of apple expressionlessly. Eat, I pouted. Indeed, mermaids who can cry pearls are all treasures. During this time, Crystal called no less than 10 times. When the first call came through, Barrett was peeling grapes for me. As the phone screen lit up, he glanced at it and his fingers froze slightly. I narrowed my eyes. Answer it. Barrett silently pressed the decline button. I said, cry for me. 5 minutes later, I happily accepted a pale purple pearl. When the second call came, Barrett was massaging my calf. And the vibration of the phone made him pause. I lazily lifted my eyelids. Answer it. Barrett hung up without expression. I said, cry. Barrett took a deep breath, his eyes slightly reddening. Plop, another pearl fell. By the third, fourth time, Barrett had developed a conditioned reflex. The moment his phone rang, his eyes would well up with tears. Even before I could say a word, his tears were already on the verge of spilling. I laughed so hard I slapped the bed. Barrett, do you have a tear incontinence condition? Barrett scowled, switched his phone to silent mode, and gritted his teeth. Jessica, don't push it. I blinked innocently. What did I do? I didn't say anything. He turned away angrily to get some air on the balcony, but less than 2 minutes later, he silently walked back and placed a pearl in my palm, murmuring, don't be mad. The system in my head was desperately stifling laughter. Host. The villain has been tamed into an automatic pearl-producing machine by you. On the day I was discharged from the hospital, I carried a sack of pearls, fully satisfied and ready to go home to string a pearl curtain. Barrett held the luggage with one hand and supported me with the other, careful not to let me bump into anything. Just as we reached the hospital entrance, Crystal suddenly rushed out from the side, her eyes red as she blocked our path. Barrett, I need to talk to you. Barrett's eyes instantly welled up with tears, his reaction almost reflexive. Crystal was stunned. I was holding back laughter so hard my stomach hurt. Quickly linking arms with Barrett, I feigned gentleness and asked, Miss Crystal, is there something you need? Crystal opened her mouth, seemingly unprepared for Barrett's reaction. After a long pause, she managed with difficulty, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you about my father's matter. Barrett coldly interrupted, no need. After speaking, he quickly pulled me toward the car, as if afraid that staying any longer would make him shed pearls again. I turned back and waved at Crystal, smiling brightly. Miss Crystal, if you need anything in the future, just go straight to Daniel. My Barrett is very busy crying pearls. I added silently in my heart. Once in the car, Barrett fastened my seatbelt with a dark expression. I poked his cheek and asked, what's wrong? Not happy. He was silent for a moment, then suddenly whispered, Jessica, do you only like my pearls? I froze for a second, then burst out laughing. Yeah, what else? Barrett's eyes darkened instantly. I leaned closer and whispered in his ear, but I prefer the way you cry more than the pearls. The next second, Barrett cupped the back of my head and kissed me fiercely. The system chimed. Ding. The villain's darkening value has dropped to 55%. Host, victory is within reach. Dazed from his kiss, I suddenly remembered something and pushed against his chest to create a little distance. What about you? Do you only like the child in my belly? Barrett's ears instantly turned red, his eyes avoiding mine. Mermaids are absolutely loyal to their mates. Oh, I narrowed my eyes. Then back on the rooftop, just spacing out, he quickly cut me off, his long lashes lowering to cast shadows under his eyes. And wondering if you only agreed to marry me because of Grandpa's money. I've never seen Barrett's tail. Ever since I found out he was a merman, I've been dying to catch a glimpse of his legendary, priceless blue tail. Every time I bring it up, Barrett's ears turn red at the tips, and he quickly changes the subject. Barrett, I lean over his back, twirling the ends of his hair with my fingers. Let me see your tail. He stiffens, then flips a page of the document with feigned composure. There's nothing special to see. What do you mean nothing special? I lean closer to his ear, deliberately lowering my voice. I heard a merman's tail is smooth and shiny, like a gemstone. Snap, the pen in his hand was crushed in half. The system in my head was rolling with laughter. Host, you've triggered his fight or flight response. I pouted. If gentle doesn't work, then brute force it is. So, that night, while Barrett was taking a shower, I sneaked into the bathroom. The bathroom was filled with steam, and tiny ripples danced on the surface of the bathtub water. I tiptoed closer, then suddenly pulled open the shower curtain. A shimmering blue fish tail swayed gently in the water. I held my breath instantly. That tail was even more beautiful than I had imagined. The scales were as translucent as deep-sea gems, the fins as thin as cicada wings, shimmering with scattered silver light in the ripples. As if the entire starry sky had been crushed and sprinkled upon it, Barrett suddenly turned around. And upon seeing me, the entire fish froze. Jessica, his voice trembled slightly. I stared at him blankly, momentarily speechless. Barrett's eyes grew increasingly panicked, his tail fin instinctively retreating into the water as he whispered almost inaudibly, "Did I scare you?" Only then did I snap out of it, shaking my head frantically. "No, you're absolutely stunning." He froze for a moment, the tips of his ears turning crimson. "Really?" "Of course." I crouched by the bathtub, eyes gleaming. "This tail looks absolutely priceless. If we auctioned it off," the system said. "Host, you really have no fear of death." Grinning, I reached out and gently stroked his tail, cold, smooth. The touch of the scales was like fine silk, yet with a unique luster. Barrett shuddered violently, a faint groan escaping his throat. "Let me touch it again." His breathing instantly became erratic, his eyelashes trembling violently as a hazy mist of tears welled up in his eyes. The system suddenly let out a lewd chuckle. "He, host, the mermaid's tail is a sensitive spot. In other words, you've pleased him." Barrett grabbed my wrist tightly, his voice hoarse beyond recognition. "Stop touching." I blinked innocently and asked, "Why, does it feel bad?" He took a deep breath and suddenly pulled me into the bathtub. Water splashed everywhere. I fell into his arms, my soaked pajamas clinging tightly to my body. Barrett's fish tail coiled around my legs, the scales lightly brushing against my skin, sending a shiver down my spine. His lips pressed against my ear, his voice low and husky. "Since you've touched it, you'll have to take responsibility." I said. "Wait, I still have 5 babies in my belly." Barrett chuckled softly, his fishtail gently slapping the water. "It's fine. I've asked the doctor. After the first 3 months, it's very safe." The system quickly went offline. "Host, take care." The next morning, I gritted my teeth while supporting my aching waist. The system sent joyful news. "Congratulations, host. The villain's corruption value has dropped to 15%. How strange. Could it be that engaging in human harmony while in mermaid form is especially effective at reducing corruption?" The 4th month of pregnancy, I suddenly remembered what the doctor had said. It was time to see how many little ones were nestled in my belly. It was just a dark, indistinguishable mass before, couldn't see anything clearly, so Barrett and I went back to the hospital. He stood at the door of the ultrasound room, with a subtle expression, as if hesitating to speak. "What's wrong?" I eyed him suspiciously. "Is there something wrong?" He fell silent for 2 seconds, then whispered, "5. I practically leaped off the examination table, nearly sending the ultrasound probe flying. "Are you mermaids really that fertile?" Barrett steadied me silently, his tone slightly exasperated. "My ancestors for 18 generations were all only children." I widened my eyes. "Then how did you end up with a whole brood?" He cleared his throat lightly, his gaze shifting evasively. "Maybe a genetic mutation." I covered my face in despair. "How long do mermaids carry their young?" 10 months. He answered immediately, then paused and added, "Just like humans, 10 months. I grabbed his collar in utter panic. 5 babies, 10 months. Won't my belly turn into a giant ball?" Barrett tried to reassure me, saying, "No, merfolk offspring develop slowly at first, and only later will they." "I don't want to turn into a ball." I cried out in grief and anger. "Barrett, it's all your fault." He pursed his lips, then suddenly reached out to gently touch my belly, whispering, "Then can crying pearls make it better?" The system burst into wild laughter in my mind. "Host, are you planning to birth an entire merfolk swim team?" I gritted my teeth. "Barrett, if I turn into a ball, you're done for." He sighed and nodded resignedly. "Fine, I'm done for." After a pause, he added, "Do you want golden pearls?" After the prenatal checkup, the doctor handed me a yellowed old photo and said with a smile, "Don't worry, ma'am. Mermaid babies are only the size of a palm when they're born." Very cute. I looked down. In the photo, little Barrett was curled up inside a seashell, his tiny blue tail shimmering like a gemstone, his round eyes glistening with innocence and naivety, completely different from his adult form. I was stunned. This is Barrett. This soft and adorable little dumpling is the same fish as that cold-faced, ruthless leader of the Eternal Night Society who casually sends people to the bottom of the ocean. The doctor nodded with a smile. Yes, the young master was very well behaved as a child, except, he paused, as if realizing he had said too much, and quickly shut his mouth. I narrowed my eyes and immediately started poking the system frantically in my mind, saying, "What's going on? This contrast is way too big. What happened to him after he came ashore?" The system murmured gloomily. "Back when I asked you to do the mission, you slacked off. Now you regret it, don't you?" I said. "Cut the crap, just tell me," the system sighed. "The villain's parents were captured when he was a child. His grandfather took him ashore to find them, but then what? It turned out that his parents had long been made into specimens and exhibited in the Human Museum for several years." My fingers trembled, and the photo nearly fell to the ground. The system continued. "His grandfather collapsed on the spot, his health deteriorating rapidly. Barrett was only 10 years old at the time. Desperate to reclaim his parents' bodies but powerless to do so, he had no choice but to join the underground forces, and later, through his efforts, he became the current leader of the Eternal Night Society." I suddenly looked up, my gaze landing on Barrett, who was waiting for me at the end of the corridor. He was looking down at his phone, his profile stern, with an unshakable gloom between his brows. Yet who would have thought that as a child? He was once an innocent little mermaid who would hide in seashells and blow bubbles. My nose tingled with emotion, and suddenly, my heart ached unbearably. Barrett noticed my gaze, looked up, and slightly furrowed his brows. "What's wrong?" I quickly walked over and hugged him tightly, burying my face in his chest. He stiffened for a moment, instinctively raising his hand to gently pat my back, softening his voice. "Did the doctor scare you?" I shook my head and mumbled, "Barrett, I'll treat you better from now on." He froze for a second, his Adam's apple bobbing slightly. I felt a slight tremor in his chest, as if he were carefully choosing his words. After a long pause, he hesitantly negotiated with me. "If I can't cry multicolored pearls for now, could I cry other colors first?" I jerked my head up to glare at him. "I'm serious." A flicker of amusement flashed in his eyes as he lowered his head to nuzzle my nose with his. "How about a blue one tonight?" "Blue? It's the color he only cries when he's in heat." I was so angry I wanted to bite him, but my heart suddenly softened when I saw the hidden unease in his eyes. This ruthless leader of the Eternal Night Society, who shows no mercy to outsiders, was now carefully observing my expression, afraid that I might be angry. Just then, his phone suddenly started vibrating wildly. Barrett glanced at the caller ID, and his expression instantly darkened. His subordinate called to say that Lucas, the second-in-command of the Eternal Night Society, had kidnapped Crystal and wanted Barrett to leave the organization. I sighed and reached out to smooth his furrowed brow. "Go if you want to. Crystal was just an innocent hostage caught in the crossfire. I couldn't disregard her life." Barrett pulled me into a tight embrace, his grip so strong it nearly took my breath away. He buried his face in the crook of my neck, his voice muffled. "When I was a kid, I got stranded on a reef while playing." Barrett's fingers unconsciously traced circles on my waist. "Back then, I couldn't transform my legs yet. I was almost discovered by humans. Crystal saved me." My heart trembled. "So that's how it is. After saving her this time, I won't interfere anymore." He raised his head, his deep sea-like eyes staring straight at me as he said, "I promise." My nose stung, and suddenly I understood why he was always so unusually tolerant of Crystal. If it weren't for that little girl who reached out to help back then, the person standing before me now might not have been a living Barrett, but rather, I didn't dare to think further, so I just stood on tiptoe and kissed his chin. "Come back early." Barrett's eyes darkened as he cupped the back of my head, deepening the kiss. When we parted, both of us were breathless. "Wait for me." His thumb brushed across the corner of my lips, and by the time he turned away, his expression had returned to its usual icy demeanor. I watched his retreating figure, my hand resting on my swollen belly. The 5 little mare children seemed to sense my emotions, stirring gently within me. The system suddenly spoke up. "Host, have you finally realized why the villain treats the female lead so specially?" I softly murmured, The slight jealousy in my heart had long been replaced by heartache. If it weren't for Crystal, I might never have met this big villain who would shed pearls for me. Will Barrett be in danger this time? The system comforted me, saying, don't worry, host, the villain is super strong. But I waited until late at night, and Barrett still hadn't returned. For some reason, I felt uneasy. Suddenly, the system blared a warning, saying Barrett had been captured. I abruptly stood up from the couch, the 5 pups in my belly kicking restlessly all at once. System, didn't you say he'd be fine? My voice trembled. What do you mean he was captured? Isn't he the leader of the Eternal Night Society? The system was uncharacteristically flustered. Host, I just returned after updating the data. Lucas somehow got his hands on mermaid suppressants. And now Barrett is locked up in the abandoned aquarium in the Southern District. Abandoned aquarium? My blood froze instantly. That place, the system said, was once the exhibition site for mermaid specimens. After Barrett's parents were made into specimens, they were publicly displayed there. He did it on purpose. My nails dug deep into my palms. Lucas did it on purpose. How could he have known Barrett's identity? The system urgently said, host, don't get agitated. You're still pregnant. Prepare the car. I grabbed my coat and rushed out, shouting at the bodyguards by the door, now, immediately. The bodyguards exchanged glances, but no one dared to disobey my order. In the car, the system was still trying to dissuade me. Host, it's too dangerous for you to go now. Shut up. I clenched my phone tightly. Pull up the aquarium's floor plan. The system sighed but still projected the 3D hologram in front of me. I quickly memorized every entrance and exit, along with the most likely location where Barrett was being held, the central giant aquarium area. That used to be the star exhibit area of the aquarium, but now, I'm afraid it's become Lucas's carefully prepared execution ground. The car screeched to a halt outside the aquarium. I took a deep breath and was about to get out when the system suddenly screamed, host, Crystal's life signal detected. She's here too. I froze mid-step. What? She must have been used as bait by Lucas and tied up. Now she's locked up with Barrett. I clenched my teeth and pulled out a gun from the trunk. The one Barrett insisted on teaching me for self-defense. Lead the way. The dark corridor echoed only with the sound of my footsteps. The further I went, the damper the air became, mixed with a faint scent of blood. My heart pounded so fast it felt like it might burst out of my chest. Turning the final corner, the sight before me made my blood run cold. In the enormous aquarium, Barrett was chained at the center. His half-human, half-fish form was fully exposed. His once glorious blue tail now dull and lifeless, his face terrifyingly pale. What shocked me even more were the bloody marks left by his struggles on his wrists and tail. Crystal was tied to a nearby pillar, crying and begging for mercy. I'm not the one Barrett cares about the most. Please let me go, Lucas sneered. For your sake, just because my brother kidnapped your dad. He cut off one of his hands. Do you think I'm stupid? Crystal said, but I already have a boyfriend. My boyfriend is Daniel. Barrett also has a wife. Why don't you go after her? Yeah, why not come after me? I'm not stupid. That woman has looks but no brains. Do you really think Barrett would like someone like that? Lucas's words had barely faded when the entire abandoned aquarium plunged into an eerie silence. Crystal's sobs caught in her throat, even her struggle forgotten. As for me, I slowly narrowed my eyes. System, I spoke grimly in my mind. Was that last remark of his insulting me or praising me? The system was suppressing laughter so hard its electronic voice trembled. Logically speaking, he both acknowledged your beauty and questioned your intelligence. This counts as a mixed review. I let out a cold laugh, my fingers unconsciously rubbing the gun grip. In the aquarium, Barrett suddenly woke up, his violent struggles making the chains clatter noisily. A few scales on his tail fin cracked from the excessive force. Blood beads seeping into the water and diffusing into a faint pink hue. Lucas, Barrett's voice was terrifyingly low. Dare to lay a finger on her and see what happens. I pouted, feeling a sour pang in my heart. His words were icy and ruthless, but alas, they weren't meant to protect me. But Crystal, system, I suddenly thought of something. Can you help me electrocute them? I can't directly interfere with the plot characters due to rule restrictions, the system said awkwardly, but host, aren't you pretty good at shooting? I sighed. Pregnant women shouldn't engage in strenuous exercise. Then, is there any protective shield or similar item I can exchange for? The system rummaged for a long time, I remember there was, but host, you're so tough that you've never exchanged for it before, so I stored it away in the warehouse. I'll have to look for it. At that moment, a person suddenly emerged from behind the door. It was Daniel. He urgently asked Lucas. Didn't we agree that Crystal was just bait? Why won't you let her go? Crystal was stunned. Daniel, what are you doing here? Lucas smirked. He's my business partner. Thanks to Mr. Daniel, I finally learned that the leader of our Eternal Night Society is actually a half-human, half-mermaid monster, and thanks to his secret sponsorship, I successfully developed a potion to suppress mermaids. Crystal widened her eyes in disbelief. Daniel, didn't you promise me you wouldn't reveal Barrett's identity? Why, Crystal, Daniel explained frantically, grandfather is sick, only mermaid flesh can ease his pain. Besides, aren't you afraid of Barrett too? Daniel, are you insane? That's just temporary relief. It can't cure. Crystal didn't dare to look Barrett in the eye. In my mind, I cursed viciously. The system was puzzled. Host, what did you say? What do those asterisks mean? I replied coldly, it means sending my regards to Daniel's entire family. There's hope for a cure. Daniel's eyes brimmed with wild hope. As long as the mermaid sheds black pearls, we can cure Grandpa's illness. Back then, we almost what? Daniel's words made my heart leap into my throat. Barrett's face was terrifyingly pale, his eyes brimming with overwhelming hatred. So it was your Duncan family. His voice was hoarse beyond recognition, the scales on his fishtail slightly flaring from agitation, glinting with a cold, icy light. You were the ones who took my parents. Daniel remained silent for a moment before nodding. Black pearls are the ultimate treasure a mermaid can cry only once in a lifetime, capable of curing terminal illnesses. My father accidentally learned that there were mermaids in the depths of the South Sea and mobilized many forces to capture them, but no matter what methods my father tried, they would rather die than shed a tear, so my father had no choice but to turn their flesh into medicine to alleviate my grandfather's illness. The system couldn't help but mock. Once a mermaid cries black pearls, they can never return to the sea. At that time, Barrett was still in the ocean depths. If they cried, they would never see their son again. Barrett, I know you hate our Duncan family, but now only you can save my grandfather. If you cry black pearls, then I'll set you free. My stomach churned violently, and I nearly vomited. Barrett's parents were tortured to death. They were sliced into pieces, turned into medicine, and even their bones were made into specimens, displayed in museums for so many years. And now Barrett has to give up returning to the sea to save his grandfather. Crystal's face turned deathly pale, tears silently streaming down. She looked at Daniel, her voice trembling. You're insane. Daniel gently wiped away her tears, his thumb lightly caressing her cheek as if soothing a frightened little animal. Crystal, I won't hurt you. His voice was deep and gentle, yet chilling. You just need to help me, make him cry. Crystal's pupils constricted. What do you mean? Daniel smiled slightly, leaned in, and whispered in her ear. You're the one he cares about most, aren't you? After speaking, he straightened up, his gaze tender yet almost cruel. Don't worry, you won't remember this either. Afterward, I'll arrange for someone to hypnotize you. Once my grandfather recovers, we'll get married. Without a trace of hesitation, he turned and walked away. Lucas understood and, holding the stun gun, walked step by step toward Crystal. Crystal struggled violently, her voice nearly tearing apart. Daniel, you bastard. Daniel didn't turn around, merely speaking calmly. Do it, ZZZZT. The stun gun pressed violently against Crystal's skin, sending convulsions through her body as her piercing screams echoed through the sealed room. Barrett stared fixedly at the scene, his fingers clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white, nails digging deep into his palms until fresh blood seeped out. It's no use, Daniel. He shook his head slowly. I can't cry anymore. The person most important to me is no longer Crystal. I couldn't hold back any longer. Crystal's screams scraped against my nerves like knives, while Daniel stood by, his gaze chillingly calm, as if merely observing an inconsequential experiment. Increase the voltage again, he said flatly. Barrett isn't heartless. He'll break down eventually. Lucas grinned ferociously as he turned up the voltage on the shock device, causing Crystal's body to stiffen violently, her throat emitting an inhuman scream. System, I roared in my mind, why haven't you found it yet? The system frantically scoured the database, Found it, a temporary shield, a bit small, can only last for 3 minutes, enough. I swiftly activated the shield over my abdomen and charged forward. At the same time, I signaled the bodyguards at the entrance to begin their encirclement. Bang! A shot struck Lucas's wrist, and the stun gun clattered to the ground. Lucas let out a scream, clutching his bloodied hand as he staggered back 2 steps, staring at me in disbelief. You, Daniel's face instantly changed. Jessica, Barrett jerked his head up, his pupils contracting sharply the moment he saw me. Jessica, his voice was almost trembling, his eyes surging with shock, fear, and fury. I tightened my grip on the gun and looked coldly at Daniel. Mr. Daniel, isn't it rather unbecoming to bully a woman? Daniel's eyes darkened with malice. Lucas glanced at me, then at Barrett, and suddenly exclaimed excitedly, Mr. Daniel, the person Barrett cares about is Jessica. Capture her. Barrett will definitely cry black pearls. Barrett slammed violently against the tempered glass in the tank, his voice hoarse to the point of cracking. Jessica, run. I dodged to the side to avoid the stick swung by Lucas, fired a shot backward to blow up the surveillance camera above my head, and yelled without turning back, run and I'll release all the kids. Barrett's motion of hitting the glass suddenly froze, the entire fish stiffening in the water. The system said, host, kick him in the 3rd leg. Lucas seized the moment to lunge at me, supporting my pregnant belly. I executed a swift sideways roll, grabbed the stun gun from the ground, and jabbed it straight at his 3rd leg. Zzzt. He let out an ouch, and curled up on the ground like a boiled shrimp. The system said, I meant kick, not, never mind, just leave it at that, you. Daniel stared at me in disbelief at my nimble movements. Aren't you just a spoiled rich wife who only knows how to spend money? I shook my numb wrist and sneered, you're the idiot, your whole family are idiots. Idiot male lead. Ha, thanks to my last mission where I became an assassin, my agility is still there, but my strength has decreased. Before the words could fully leave my mouth, the entire tempered glass pane suddenly cracked like a spiderweb. Barrett's full-force impact in his mermaid form finally took effect, seawater gushing out mixed with shattered glass. His tail carved a sharp arc through the debris-littered floor, directly swatting away 2 charging thugs. Jessica, he grabbed my wrist tightly, his tail still dripping blood. Are you okay? I was just about to answer when suddenly, bang, the door was violently kicked open, and a group of bizarre-looking sea creatures charged in aggressively. Leading them was the doctor, that clownfish human hybrid who had once performed my prenatal checkup, now brandishing a scalpel. Seized these 2 humans, dragged them to the depths. I rubbed my eyes, wondering if I was hallucinating. Barrett, I turned my head stiffly. Do you employ cross-species mercenaries in the underwater world? Barrett's lips twitched, but before he could speak, the doctor stomped over angrily. Young mistress, these are the guards left to the young master by the lord and lady. Squinting, I saw 2 giant king crabs waving their claws in the front row, flanked by several grinning moray eels in the middle, and even a few lobsters carrying coral shields in the back. The system was laughing hysterically in my mind. Host, is this the underwater version of the Avengers? The doctor continued explaining, normally, they can't transform legs, so they have to stay underwater. They only come ashore forcibly when the young master is in mortal danger. I silently glanced at Barrett. The bodyguards your parents left for you are quite unique. Barrett rubbed his forehead, his ears slightly red. They were pretty normal when they were underwater. Before the words had even finished, the lead king crab had already clamped onto Lucas's pant leg with its claw, hoisting him upside down in an instant. Lucas, put me down, you lowly creatures. Whack. A moray eel lashed its tail across his face, leaving a bright red mark on the spot. I'm speechless, the system said. Awesome. Daniel paled and stepped back, only to find his path blocked by several lobsters. A coral shield clattered to the ground beside his feet, startling him into kneeling. The doctor bowed respectfully. Young master, how shall we proceed? Barrett cast a cold glance at Daniel and Lucas, his voice icy. Throw them back into the sea, feed them to the sharks. I quickly grabbed his sleeve. Wait, wouldn't the sharks get diarrhea from eating such people? The doctor pondered seriously. The young mistress is right. How about tying them to rocks and sinking them into the sea, more eco-friendly? Daniel and Lucas were stunned. As they were being dragged away, the two still shouted threats to kill all these seafood creatures. The doctor was the last to leave, taking along the already electrocuted and unconscious Crystal. He patted Barrett on the shoulder and said with emotion, "Young master, the master and mistress would surely be comforted to know you found such a wonderful partner." Barrett's eyes flickered slightly as he softly responded with an "mm." After everyone had left, I poked Barrett's abs. "So, your childhood playmate was seafood." Barrett suddenly scooped me up in his arms, his fish tail having already transformed back into long, slender legs. Now, he lowered his head to nibble my earlobe. His voice hoarse. "It's time to go home and discuss your threat to release our children into the wild," I said. "Wait, I still have 5 babies in my belly." Barrett chuckled softly. "Don't worry, the mermaid's pregnancy is very, very safe." The system quickly went offline. "Host, take care." On the day of delivery, Barrett was so nervous he nearly tore the delivery room apart. He alternated between grabbing the doctor by the collar and roaring, "Save the mother!" to crouching in the corner muttering, "If anything happens to Jessica, I'll drown myself in the sea." The whole fish was completely out of his mind. When 5 wrinkled little mermaids were brought out, he took one look and turned his face away in disgust. "Too ugly. Take them away and release them, fresh from childbirth." I grabbed a pillow and threw it at his face. "Barrett, say that again," the system said. "Host, you're amazing." As it turned out, perhaps because their mother was human, these 5 little mermaids mastered the ability to freely transform their legs much earlier than Barrett did in his time, and used this talent for mischief. At the first-grade mermaid parent-teacher conference, Barrett and I were called to the school for the very first time. The homeroom teacher adjusted her glasses, spreading 5 report cards on the table. "Madam, your children are quite unique. Boss, you failed swimming class. As a mermaid, you're actually afraid of water." The homeroom teacher's lips twitched. He clung to the float board and cried the entire lesson. Barrett slammed the table and stood up on the spot. "You're a mermaid. How can you be afraid of water?" The boss pouted, on the verge of tears. "But the pool smells like disinfectant." Second child, peeing in the pool. He turned the entire pool light yellow. The homeroom teacher's glasses gleamed, and he insisted it's perfectly normal for mermaids to pee like that. Barrett's veins bulged on his forehead. "When the hell did I ever teach you?" The second child blinked his blue eyes. "Dad and Mom were in the bathtub last time." I immediately covered the child's mouth. "All right, no need for details on that one." The youngest, eating spicy strips in the water. He stuffed the packaging into the filter inlet. The homeroom teacher's PPT displayed the repair bill. "Now the entire pool is covered in red oil." The third child proudly puffed out his little chest. I even shared some with the koi fish. Fourth and fifth kids, skipping class to eat barbecue. In the surveillance footage, 2 short little legs happily climbed over the wall, holding the pocket money they'd stolen from the third child, the homeroom teacher. They even used a lighter to grill their classmates' squid tentacles in the school grove. Barrett's expression looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. "How dare you 2 use fire?" The 5th child tilted his head. "But didn't Mom say eating raw food can easily cause stomachaches?" The entire office fell into deathly silence. I slowly turned to look at Barrett. "Were you like this as a child too?" Barrett wiped his face. "At most, I put salt in the teacher's teacup." The homeroom teacher suddenly started frantically rummaging through the drawers. "Where's my resignation letter? Where did I put my resignation letter?" On the way home, the 5 kids were still chattering away. "Mom, the P.E. teacher said my breaststroke looks like a jellyfish." I read my essay, my dad, to the whole class, and the teacher said it's impossible for a mermaid to secretly cry pearls in the middle of the night. "Next week is the parent-child sports day. Can Dad use his tail to compete in the 4x100 meters? Barrett grabbed the 2 kids by the collars of their shirts, gritting his teeth. Release them all." The system asked me. "Host, the villain's corruption value has been reset to 0. Do you wish to leave this world?" I shook my head. "I want to use all my points to exchange for permanent residency in this world." On the custom-made large bed, 5 little mermaids were sleeping soundly. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Barrett was clumsily trying to cook seafood porridge. That once gloomy and obsessive mermaid now even had scales on its tail that shimmered with a gentle glow. The system notification sounded. "Exchange successful. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the permission to spend the rest of your life with the villain." before leaving, it suddenly asked me, was it worth it, using all your points for a fish? I smiled at the system and said, look, he cries pearls for me, in the small box by the pillow. The purple pearls were from when he was jealous, the pink pearls from intimate moments, and that one-of-a-kind red pearl, it was the night when the 5 cubs were about to be born, and he held me, crying. The system grumbled and disappeared. Hopeless love fool. The ending of the Duncan family was even bleaker than imagined. After Daniel's death, his grandfather, unable to obtain the black pearl, began to suffer from the rotting of all his internal organs. The old man who once sustained his life by consuming mermaid flesh ultimately turned into a pile of rotting flesh on his deathbed, his final screams reeking of a foul, fishy stench. As for Daniel's parents, one stormy night, Barrett went out alone. When he returned, he was drenched, seawater dripping from his hair, his fingertips still stained with fresh blood. I didn't ask anything, just handed him a towel. He silently wiped his hands, then suddenly said, I threw them into the North Sea vortex. That was the darkest abyss of the deep sea, where even schools of fish would detour. Crystal has mental issues, constantly fantasizing that Daniel is still alive. They just had a little tiff, so, every time she would squat at our doorstep, tears in her eyes, looking for Barrett, seeking a bit of comfort, Barrett called the doctor, who washed away some of her painful memories, including Barrett, one ordinary afternoon. Barrett and I took the kids to the supermarket and happened to see Crystal being cornered in an alley by her drunken father. Go ask Barrett for money, doesn't he listen to you the most? The man grabbed her hair and slammed her against the wall. Crystal opened her eyes in confusion. Barrett. She truly remembered nothing. She couldn't remember there ever being a mermaid who walked onto the rooftop for her. Barrett covered the children's eyes and turned toward the ice cream cabinet. Strawberry or chocolate? The 5 little ones immediately burst into a noisy clamor, none of them glancing back at the alley. As the morning sunlight streamed into the bedroom, Barrett was braiding the 3rd child's hair. The 5 little mermaids thrashed their tails wildly, leaving the carpet soaking wet. While Dad wasn't looking, the eldest secretly squeezed toothpaste into the 2nd child's shell hair clip. Barrett, I called lazily from the pillow, your son got into another fight. He turned back helplessly, his eyes brimming with tenderness. Coming, the deep sea will never dry up, and the mermaid will find her way home. After hearing the story above, what are your thoughts? Feel free to share your opinions in the comments section. Looking forward to hearing from you. If you liked this story, don't forget to like it, share it, and subscribe to my channel. See you next time.